Okay, Seder, Shavua Tov. We're continuing with our weekly shirim on the Ramchal's Adir BaMarom on the Idra Rabbah, and we're still at the heart of the Shvira, and we're coming towards the end of the explanation of the Shvira. And it's again important for us to understand why it's so significant to see the emergence of existence as taking root within the Shvira, within this cataclysmic shattering, which, as the Ramchal is pointing out, based on the Ari, is far more than just some surprising trauma that disrupted a preset system, but rather it is the very process through which the system emerges. That this chaos is a very measured form of chaos. In fact, there's a hyper specificity to it. There's a wisdom, there's a logic to the workings of the traumatic stage here. And what the Ramchal is giving us is we're going to see over and over how this fundamentally intermediary stage that operates between the worlds of the infinite and the eventual emergence of the worlds of Atzilus, Bria, Yitzir, and Asiya, which is referred to as Olam HaTohu, the world of chaos, the world of the Nikudim, the world of Shvira Sakelim, far more than just being a momentary blip on the radar that disrupts a previously set system and then gets taken care of by the emergence of the next system, this intermediary stage of the Shvira is the very bridge that enables the system to take shape. It is, by definition, purposeful. It is the root of all purposefulness. This Shvira Sakelim, the emergence of potentiality into being itself, which is then eventually going to express itself down, down, down through the Seder Hashtalshalis into the specificity of being, rests at the center of what we're trying to do as human beings. Everything that we do is birurim. Everything that we do is grappling with the post-traumatic elements of the shvira, the shattering, the brokenness, the vestiges of light that remain, and it's our job to rectify them, to elevate them, and to rebuild the partsufim. But all of this is not in contradistinction to the shvira, but rather the next unfolding stage of the shvira. And that's what we're going to see right now, that the shvira sakelim is ultimately so that the gvul can emerge, so that limitation can emerge. And it's the slow and steady process in which limitation emerges. And it has to be by way of this momentary, immature stage of shvira sakelim. And this gvul that's coming out, this limitation that's emergent, is the potentiality towards concealment that enables for the development of a playing field of bechira chafshis, of volitional choice between right and wrong, light and darkness, which is ultimately the main purpose of the creation of existence. So the unfolding process of the gvul and the shvira and the chaos and the tohu is all there to set up the basic expression of existence, which is going to be the place that the human being is going to be forced to engage in avodah. And this obviously has profound impacts on every element of our lives, because if we look at the post-traumatic symptoms of constriction, concealment, etc., all of those byproducts of the Shvira, if we look at them as symptoms of some cataclysm that took shape which shouldn't have taken place, so then all of the work that we're doing is just to fix some mistakes that we could return back to the place before the mistake, which places all of our avodah, all of the work that we're doing, in a state of deferral, as if it's not the main work, it's just the thing that has to be done so that we can get to the main work. And seen as such, a person is going to become alienated from the work that they're doing, from the avodah Hashem and the avodah of the birurim that they're doing. But when we raise the shvira to its rightful place as the preliminary emergence of existence through which everything is going to ultimately unfold. So then all of the work that we're doing with the Shvira, all of the clarifications, all of the entrance into the Shvira and the rectification of it all is a fundamentally significant process, not secondary, but fundamental. And we're going to see in the language of the Ramchal. Zok the Heilige Ramchal. Va'ashuv lefarish inyan hamelachim ha'ela v'shvirasam. Let's return now and talk about the death of these kings, the death of these early Zion Malachim, the Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes, Netzach, Hod, and Yesod of the Olam of the Nikudim. And one of the klalim that we see in the Shvira is that when it came to the upper three spheros of Keser, Chachma, and Bina, there was no Shvira. Those were aligned properly. Those were set up properly. And it's only in the Zion Tachtonim, the lower seven spheros of Chesed down to Malchus, where we see the Shvira taking place. Now, in the Rashash, this becomes the bedrock of the entire system because each and every one of the spheros represents a partsuf. And so when we say that Keser, Chachma, and Bina didn't break, we're talking about the partsufim of Keser, Chachma, and Bina. But we're not going to delve into the world of the Rashash now, which is also fundamentally rooted in an understanding of the Shvira or the Leshem. We're going to focus on what the Ramchal is telling us. So we see in the Arizal that, let's say, the 10 spheros of Olam HaNikudim, Keser, Chochmah, and Bina came out properly and they didn't shatter. It's only by the Zayin Tachtonim from Chesed down to Malchus that the shattering takes place. Because what's happening in the Olam of the Shvira is that there has to be kalim there to receive the light that's coming down, right? Everything has been set up to be the balance between kalim and light, the tzimtzum and the kav. Everything is there to ensure that there's the proper balance between content and container. When there's an imbalance between content and container, the content outweighs the capacity of the container to hold it, the container shatters and it falls apart. The problem in the time of Shvira was that each and every kli, after Keser Chachman Bina, after the higher levels of the Moichin were able to transfer the energy and the lights in a proper balance, Chesed received everything. And there was an element of Ana Emloch there. In the world of Tohu, in the world of the Nekudim, there was an individualism that was at distinction and in contradistinction to joining together. There was a certain egoism, so to say, inherent within the way in which the spheros were functioning, where each and every sphere wanted to receive all of the light without distributing it down to the other spheros in the hopes of balancing it out. In the Meforshe Ha'arizal, and this is brought down from the Talmidei Ha'ari in the Eitz Chaim itself, it was operating in a territory of fear. It was not the derech of ahava, which is the derech of chavivusa talia milsa, which allows for a healthy sharing without a sense of constriction or deficiency, but rather enoughness. That unlike the world of rectification, which shares and is operating in a space of love and mutual dependency, in the world of Shvira, it was operating according to the principle of fear, where each sphere was afraid to request from the sphere above it, and each sphere was afraid to share with the sphere below it. And therefore, so to say, when all of the lights come down from the Keser Chachman Bina, of Olam HaNikudim, where there's not this shattering. And then it comes to Chesed. Chesed takes everything and it can't handle everything, and therefore it breaks. And then Gevura tries to take everything and can't handle everything, and it breaks. And Chesed falls down, and Gevura falls down, and so too down to the last Midos. And all of these Zion Malachim, each and every one of these kings of Edom that said, Ana Emloch, I want to be king, I want to hold everything, I want to be the treasurer of all of the lights, that causes the Shvira. And so in the breaking, there's Keser Chachman Bina, which are operating in an operating state of fullness, where they're able to hold the lights and able to distribute the balance amongst themselves. But it's the Zayin Tachtoinim, unlike the Gar, which is going to be the place of the shattering. Zak the Heilige Ramchal. Now let's return back to the kings and their shattering. Hine Eser Sviros. There's always 10 spheros. Anytime that there's an emergent process, it comes by way of the 10 spheros. Hayu gimel omdois beside kavim, chachab, kihim kablu yoter koach v'yoter tikun. When it comes to the shvira, it was an infantile way of relationship where each thing tried to receive everything from the level above it, and then it had to share everything with the low level beneath it. It was a singular ray of hierarchical reality where there was giving and receiving, and that line of giving and receiving got disrupted, and everybody tried to take everything. The tikun is going to be not a singular line like the world of chaos, but rather it's going to be three evenly distributed lines of what the Tikun Zohar refers to as Chad Arich, Chad Katzir, v'Chad Memutza. There's one long line, one short line, and one medium line, which ultimately represents the Gimel Kavin of right, left, and center, the Kav Yamin, the Kav Small, and the Kav Ha'emsai, which is the Mitkala, which is the balancing act. That's in the territory of the human being becoming the model through which HaKadosh Baruch Hu is revealing himself. And just as the human being is composed of a right, a left, and a center, so too the Olam HaTikun and the redistribution of energy in the proper way where each line can balance out the paradoxical energy from the other line and arrive at kind of a medium balance, that's going to be the tikkun of the kavin, where the world is going to be arranged according to the kav yamin, kav small, and kav emsa, which is the olam tikkun. But in the olam of tohu, all there was a singular line, and that's where the shvira came from. So when we look at the first three spheros of the olam nikudim, the keser chachman bina, those were already operating by way of the kav. The reason they were operating by way of the kavin, which is that redistribution and that process of right, left, and center, which has the ability to hold all of the lights properly because they're sharing with each other. The reason is because they were able to receive lights from the interiority of Adam Kadmon. Mashe'ein kain. Mashe'ein kain. when we come to the lower parts, when we come to the lower spheres, which are the Zayin Tachtonim. That's where the Shvira takes place. And the reason that Keser, Chachma, and Bina were able to sustain themselves even in the world of Nikudim, ki halo metzias zun hu haya ha'ikari bazeh hamakom, b'hainu hazayin tachtonos. The reason that Keser, Chachma, and Bina are not really entering into the conversation of the Shvira, and what we're saying is that they weren't Nishbar, is because the main thing that needed to come out in the world of the Shvira was ultimately the Zayin Tachtonim. The reason that all we're focusing on is the Zayin Tachtonim is because that's the main focus here, that what is emergent here in the time of the Shira is the basic shape of existence, which is going to operate in accordance to the 6 days and the seventh day of Shabbos, the Zayin Tachtonos, the Vak, the Chesed through Yesod, and the Malchus. Those are the most important, and that's why the Shira takes place. Aval Hagar, when it comes to the Keser Chachman Bina of those Olam Hanikudim, Afal Pi Shehem Kan, Hinehem Besoid Ha'av V'Hasag HaMetukanim Kvar, Perush Besoid Arich Anpin V'Abba V'Ima, V'Al Kein Yesh Behem Tikun Yoter. But when it comes to the Keser Chachman Bina, we're looking at those as the partsufim that are already metukan. Those are the shemos of Ab and Sag, we said, which is going to be Keser, Chachma, and Bina. Those elements are not what the fixing needs to fix. Ab is fixed already. Sag is fixed already. Keser is always fixed. Ab and Ima are always fixed. Because they're part and parcel of the Shvira economy, in spite of the fact that they didn't break, we still speak of a pagam, so to say, a certain blemish that takes place in the nahi of Keser and the fall that takes place by the achorayim of Chachma and Bina. But nevertheless, in comparison and in relationship to the full breaking of the Zayin Tachtonim, the three upper spheros of Olam HaNikudim are not considered as having been broken, even though when we look at them in isolation, we can speak of a certain blemish that takes place. But because those operate in the upper realms of functioning, the Ab and the Sag, the Shem Havaya of the Yudin and the Shem Havaya of the Yud and the Aleph, which represents Chachma, Bina, and Keser, so those things are fixed and they have more of a tikkun. Aval zeh ma shetzarich shetavin. We still have to understand something, that even though we talk about the Keser, Chachma, and Bina of Olam HaNikudim as if they're totally fixed, ki hinei arich anpin abba v'ima shenetaknu kvar, netaknu lema shetzarich lahem, v'lo lema shetzarich bahem letikun hazun hanimshachim mehem. V'hu sod v'tikunayhu lo yitkaimu shehizkir lamala b'gilufei haparsa k'may shekosov. But it's fundamental for us to understand. Anytime we look at the Gar, anytime we look at Keser, Chachma, and Bina or Moichin, there's two roles that Keser, Chachma, and Bina play. There's the light of the moichin in and of themselves, and then there's the light of the moichin and their capacity to be nimshach and to be drawn down into the Zayin Tachtonim, which is the lower part of the partzuf, so as to invigorate them and illuminate the energy of the upper gar within the Zayin Tachtonim. So when it comes to the Olam of Nikudim, when we say that the Keser, Chachma, and Bina were not broken, that is vis-a-vis themselves. That, of course, Keser, Chachma, and Bina, the partzufim of Arach Anpin, Abba, V'Ima, the shemos of Ab and Sag, those things in and of themselves are rectified. But the rectification that they play and the role that they play within the Zayin Tachtonim, which is the drawing down of the Moichin down into the Midos themselves, that was not taking place in the world of Olam Hanikudim. And this is what the Zohar HaKadosh said earlier when we said that in spite of the fact that the Keser, Chachma, and Bina were there in the time of Nikudim, what we say is v'tikunayhu lo yitkaimu, the tikunim, the process in which the upper partzufim, the upper lights, were able to condense the light so as to allow it to descend downwards into Zer Anpin and Malchus in a more measured way, that wasn't there. And therefore, even though Keser, Chachma, and Bina were fixed in and of themselves, nevertheless, the fixing that they needed to do to ensure that the Zayin Tachtonim were mushlam, that wasn't fixed. And that's why the Shvira takes place. Ki kvar shamata, we've already spent so much time explaining. You've already heard, Hayos harishonim nikrim yud kei mitzad hismashach sam betachtonim shehem vavei. Because in truth, this Keser, Chachma, and Bina, the Yud and the Hey, we said already that we don't have a true access point to Yud and Hey. We don't have a true access point to the interiority of Adam Kadmon, which are the shemos of Ab and Sag. The only way that we actually have accessibility to them is their relationship that they have with the Zayim Tachtonim, Sha'alna meyamim Rishonim, that when it comes to drawing down the influence of the Yamim Rishonim, which are the Gimel Rishon, which are Keser, Chachma, and Bina, it's only going to be in relationship to the Vav Hey, meaning to say that even though we don't have access to Chachma and Bina and Keser, to Ab and Sag, Nevertheless, anytime we see a Vav Hey, which is the Zayin Tachtonim, by definition there has to be a Yud Hey. And even though that Yud Hey is only holding the place of the true Yud Hey, which can't be revealed fundamentally, and therefore the only relationship that we have to Kachab and to Keser Chachma and Bina is by way of the influence that they hold within the Vav Hey, and therefore we call them as if they're Yud K in relationship to the Vav Hey. Nevertheless, in and of themselves, they're considered as if they have no relationship to the Vav. And that's what we're seeing in the time of the Shvira as well. Yes, they were there. Because anytime we're talking about a Zayin Tachtoin and we have to speak of a Yud K. But nevertheless, they weren't revelatory within the Vav Hey yet so as to fix them. Ki kvar shamata, we've already said, Heyos Harishonim Nikrim Yudke. Keser Chachman Bina Ab and Saga referred to as Yudke. Why are they referred to as Yudke? Misad Hismashcham Betachtoinim Shem Vavhe, only by way of their relationship with the lower partsufim, which are the Zayin Tachtonos, and therefore, because there's a Vavhe, we're also going to have to assume that there's a Yudhe as well. So we call them Yudhe. But in this circumstance, we're not calling them Yudhe. The Al Tiksha Imkain Harihaya Kfar Behem Mashat Sarach Lefi Atachtoinim, Ki Al Kain Karum Yudke. And then don't say over here then, if they were there, nevertheless, they had their impact on him. Because we've already spoken about that. Aval ha'emesu shekol eila hadvarm ha'ela yesh lahem shiur v'gvul meduktak bediktuk gadol ki hayamashet tzarech lo hitziam aval lo masha hayatzarech laha'amidam b'ha'amada v'kiyum lehislabish b'hem karoi. The answer to this question is that in spite of the fact that there's a kachab there, in spite of the fact that there's a keser chachman bina, which by definition implies that there's already a relationship between yud k and vav k, because if there was no relationship, then we wouldn't even be calling them yud k. So how can we say that tikunaihu lo yitkayim? If they're there, then they by definition have a certain impact. Zok tehele Ramchal that no, in truth, everything that's taking place here, all of these things that are taking shape, are in accordance with a very delicate and hyper precise measure and limitation that is measured in a very specific diktuk, because all that emerged at this time was exactly what needed to emerge. So yes, Keser Chachman Bina enabled a certain illumination from themselves, but they did not yet reveal the level of revelation that was needed to ensure that the Zayin Tachtonim were able to maintain themselves. So yes, the Kachab is revealing itself here. In the world of the Nikudim, there's always a gar. It's always there. It's not that we're missing a gar. It's not that we're missing Keser Chachma and Bina. It's just that Keser Chachma and Bina are not doing the work that they need to do. V'nimsa shahagar haya bahem eze tikun. That certainly the gar, the Keser Chachma and Bina, had a certain element of rectification by dint of the fact that we're relating to them, which means that they're yud hey in relationship to a vav hey. Nevertheless, they're not entering into the relationship wherein they influence the Zayin Tachtonim. And because the Gar had a little bit of a tikun, they operate in the side of a kavim. They have this capacity to redistribute the energy. Aval haZayin Tachtonim lo yashim tikun. But Chesed down to Malchus had no tikun whatsoever. Ulechein hayuzu tachazeh. And therefore they were one after the other, and they were not able to distribute their energy properly. Now, this is fundamental because when we look at the Shvira, it's important for us to understand that when we look down at the broken vessels, it's not that we're saying, oh, these are broken things that are missing a Keser, Chachma, and Abina, and now we have to draw a Keser and Chachma Abina from far away into these broken vessels so as to illuminate these broken vessels. There was always a Gar there. There's always an inherent Gar. There's always a Keser, Chachma, and Bina, and a latent wholeness that is embedded within every particularized form of broken experience. The process of Birurim is not simply drawing down new moichin that were never there, but being mezachich, and rectifying and clarifying and revealing that already inherent within those broken pieces is the light of the fixing, that the gar is there, that every Zayin Tachtonos, in truth, the upper point holds a hidden three within itself, as the Arizal talks about, and as the Ramchal makes, as the Rashash makes so fundamental in Rechov Sanar. So what we're saying is that there's a gar here in Kudim, but that gar, in spite of the fact that it's there, the Keser, Chachma, and Bina are there, the light of rectification is there. Nevertheless, it's not doing the work it needs to do yet, and that's by definition the exact nature of the Shvira Sakelim. Perush. Shelo haya bahem rak mitziusam harishon shehi hayoisam zayin sfiros velo nigla bahem hachibor hatzarech mehem mizeh lezeh mipnei hata'amim shepirashti lamala. Meaning to say, says Ramchal, all that is emergent here in the Olam Ha'ikudim, which is the first instantiation, the birth of Zer Anpin, the bedrock in which the foundations are going to be set, which is going to be the birth of the entirety of existence, all that is coming out in its purity is going to be the Zayin Tachtonim. This is what the shape of existence is going to be at the stage of Olam Hanikudim. It's deliberately set up this way, that all we have is the bedrock of the Zayin Tachtonim and the Tikunim that come from the Gimel Rishon, which enables the interconnectivity between the Zayin Tachtonim, was not there yet. Why? Just as we explained before, says the Ramchal, there was no Parsa there was no Tikunim there needed to be an emergence of the Gvul, the realm of Sitra Achra or concealment needed to be able to emerge. All of the differentiated reasons that we give for the Shvira, this is why it was set up as such. Vihine be'emes, says the Ramchal, Min habechina hazos ra'ui sheteitze hasitra achra veloy mebechina mitukanes. And as we said for the Ramchal, rooting himself fundamentally in the Arizal, the main purpose, one of the essential purposes that we can understand with regards to the Shvira Sakelim, is so that the potency of limitation can emerge from within the unlimited. The potential towards limitation, which the infinite needs to reveal in order to be fully and completely infinite, which is the shorish of the Gvul, which is the shorish of the Tzimtzum, which was revealed within the Rishimu, which is the birth of the Chalal Apanui, which is going to be the site that receives the Kav, which is going to be the process that allows itself to emerge as Adam Kadmon, which is the beginning of the Shvira. All of it is there so as to enable the emergence of this element that we are going to refer to as the Sitra Achra. The Sitra Achra, the possibility of otherness, the possibility of there being a space of concealment wherein the divine light of unity is not being revealed. And that is going to be the entire playing field of human history, both on a collective level as well as an individual level. It was also that this potency that existed far, far up in the potentiality towards being, so that it can emerge and unfold itself in an actualized way, the first point that it begins to congeal itself, the first point that this shoresh of concealment can emerge, the shoresh of the Sitra Achra, is from this place of Shvira Sakelim. It needed to emerge, and therefore it couldn't have operated in a fixed way. Because if things were rectified completely, then this potency towards concealment would not emerge. And therefore we see that the fundamental purpose for the imperfection at the base of existence is so that the concealment of the Sitra Achra can begin to emerge into existence. And that is the purpose of creation. When we look in the writings of the Arizal, what happens in the time of the Shvira Sakelim is that first and foremost there are 10 Kalim that come out, the Kalim of Keser, Chachma, Bina, Chesed, down to Malchus. Those Kalim of Keser, Chachma, and Bina were able to maintain themselves, and the Kalim of the Zayin Tachtonim were not able to maintain themselves once the light re-entered in. And so there's Oros and Kalim, and the Kalim shatter because there's a profound imbalance within the Oros and the Kalim. And those 7 lower kalim are the ones that shatter and they compose this worldly existence and its post-traumatic quality. The 10 kalim come out first. That's what takes shape first in the Olam Hanikudim. First and foremost, there are going to be kalim, unlike the Olam Hatikun where the light is going to come first. The him told them in Atzimsum. And where are these kalim? In truth, the kalim are an emergent quality as a result of the tzimtzum. It's only through the concealment of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's infinite light which allows for the emergence of the first kli, which is the Chalal HaPanui. And then within the Chalal HaPanui, what we find is the irreducible light of the infinite that remains there, which is the sharish of the kalim, which is the secret of the rishimu that hides within the Chalal. So the emergence of kalim, or the first instantiation of a kli, if we're speaking in a different type of language, is the tzimtzum and the rishimu within the tzimtzum itself. And that is where the emergent qualities of the Kalim are going to draw themselves, because the Tzimtzum is the Hiskalus of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's capacity to conceal himself. At that point, it's fundamentally clear that the Tzimtzum is a Minei Ubei, and it's an emergence from within HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself, Kavyachol, so too with regards to the Rishimu. But nevertheless, once the Rishimu has contained that infinite light, and the infinite light is only revealing itself by way of the pointed dot of contraction, and that's where the Kav is going to draw itself out from. So once that Rishimu is there, even though from Mitzad HaElyon it's the same infinite light as beforehand, nevertheless, Mitzad HaTachton, there's going to be a certain blockage, and as such, there's going to be the emergence of gradations. And within gradations, there can always be something that rests at the bottom of the gradations, which is going to be the place of concealment. So after these kalim emerged from within the tzimtzum and the rishimu, achar kach besoichem hayat tzarich lehispashtes ha'atzmut zakav besoid ha'oris. What was meant to happen is that these kalim were meant to be set up, and the kav, the lights, which come down through the kav itself, were meant to enter into the kalim, and there was meant to be a balance that could reveal something more. V'tzarich sheteda, but we have to understand. Ki hine hakli bekli hanimtza bekli nimsa shoyresh sheyoitzi hasitra achra. This emergence of the kalim, which are rooted in the tzimtzum and the rishimu, this is the place in which the sitra achra can begin to emerge. Mitzad ha'oros, mitzad the lights, there is no emergence of otherness, because all there is the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's the miracle of the tzimtzum and the rishimu and all of these gradations and processes of closing and opening that eventually allow for the congealment and the formation of kalim. And these kalim are the first place where we can begin to discuss the nature of a sitra achra, because once we have a vessel that's opposite to the light, that's meant to contain the light, so then we have the possibility of the containment element expressing itself in minimized ways, which can eventually emerge into the sitra achra. Perush, ki ka'asher chidesh ha'ma'atzil chidush ha'oilam besoid ha'tzimtzum, v'hiniach harishimu shemimenu na'asu ha'kelim, hine harishimu ha'hu haya lefi ha'metzias sheratsha sheyimtza ha'olam v'kivan sheratza shetihiyah ba'olam hasitra achra hine vade shetzarich shehachanas harishimu tihiyah noisanes lezeh. The secret of the emergence of the sitra achra is not some accident, but rather it is the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu decided that he wanted to be Batzamsim himself. That was going to be the general shape of existence. And the tzimtzum and the irreducible trace of infinite light, the rishimu that rests within the tzimtzum, is by definition the emergence of the nature of kalim. And once HaKadosh Baruch Hu revealed this Rishimu, which is the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not going to reveal himself in his full manner of perfection, but rather he's going to conceal himself, and he's going to reveal the Tzimtzum, which is the Koach HaChisaron, the element of the possibility of deficiency, something appearing to be deficient without wholeness. That is going to be the territory of the playing field of human volitionality, and that is rooted in the Rishimu itself, which is Hashem's revelation of his Koach HaChisaron. It's in accordance with this Rishimu, which is going to be the existence that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants to eventually unfold within the world, and it's because HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted there to be concealment. Why did HaKadosh Baruch Hu want there to be concealment? As we're going to see for the Ramchal, it's the secret of the Yichud, that in the beginning it was infinite light revealed, in the middle it's infinite light concealed, at the end it's going to be infinite light revealed. So the Yichud and the Sof are already unified. The beginning and the end are already unified. It's the middle territory, it's the Emtza, it's that point of concealment and constriction, and the Tzimtzum and the Rishimu and the Adam Kadmoin and the Kav and the Oilamos of Ak and Abia and all of the Shvira and all of the Sitra Achra. It's in that Emsa, it's in that period of the Shis Alfei Shan and the Have Alma, this time period of constriction and concealment, where at best we seem to be able to hear HaKadosh Baruch Hu by way of the echo and by way of trying to find him within constriction and concealment itself. It's because Hashem wanted the Sitra Achra to be revealed so that we have the ability to reveal him more and more. And as a result of Hashem's desire for the Sitra Achra to be revealed from the outset of creation, Hine Vadai so by definition, each and every stage has to make room for all of the eventual stages of unfolding. So the Kalim are rooted in the Rishimu, which is rooted in the Tzimtzum, which is rooted in the ultimate purpose of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's desire for the creation of the world, which is the Dir B'Tachtonim, which is the unfolding of the Sitra Achra, which is concealment, so that we can overcome the concealment and come to find HaKadosh Baruch Hu there as well. Ach ze tzarich shetavin. What we have to understand is as follows: Ki ha'anafim shehem habrios, which include the sitra achra, einam yoitzim min hashoresh shehem hasviros, ela keshayamdu hasviros be'erech alehem. Perush sheyihu ba'oisa hakoyach haroi lahoitzi habrios hahem. So the question that the Ramchal is addressing here is that if HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted Sitra Achra to come out into the world, why couldn't HaKadosh Baruch Hu have just created Sitra Achra? Why couldn't HaKadosh Baruch Hu just created a world of Gvul? Why couldn't there have been this process directly from the infinite light into the Kalim? Why does there have to be this intermediary stage of Tohu and Tikun and history and concealment and the Kalim, which are emergent from the Tzimtzum and the Rishimu? Why does it have to be as such? So the Ramchal is saying that when it comes to HaKadosh Baruch Hu's hashpa'ah downwards, the only way that we can receive light from above is if there's a certain relationality a certain relative positioning in which the lower level has some grasp of the higher level. When there's an erech, when there's a relational space between above and below, so then above can descend down below. But when it's ein aruch, when there's no levels, when there's no relative positioning, meaning to say with the infinite light prior to creation and existence afterwards, so then that light cannot be revealed in any formidable way. Revelation is dependent upon proximity, and proximity is dependent upon a likeness of kind. In spite of the fact that there's a fundamental difference, and a differentiation of type, nevertheless, there's a fundamental relationality that enables the transference from above to below. But if there's no erech, and in Chassidus this is discussed so much, the difference between ein doime and ein aruch lecha, that if there's no erech, there's not going to be any relationality. Perush, the light above has to be in a certain relational level in which it has the susceptibility and a relationship to that which is going to emerge from within it afterwards. Because the lights in Atzilus are not going to reveal malachim, which operate in the world of Bria, Yitzir, and Asiya, because that's a differentiation of type. The world of Atzilus is a profound world of illumination, and the profound world of illumination is not going to reveal elements that are separate from the profound world of illumination. Ki rav ha'or bahem mimashet tzarech shehiyeh lohoitzi hamalach. The reason is because the light of Atzilus far outweighs, far overwhelms the limited space that a malach takes up. And therefore, the world of Atzilus is not going to emerge in malachim because there has to be a relationship between the levels. B'chein b'hayosim b'bechinas bria lo yotzru Lo yotziu shall yetzira. And just as Atzilus won't give shape to Bria, so too Bria won't give shape to Yetzira except from the bottom, which is the relational space, the Malchus of Bria, which has a relationship with Yetzira. That's where the relationship is going to be. Each and every gradational level is separate and apart from the level below it. It's only going to be the Netzachod and Yisod and Malchus of the lower level, which is already built for the unfolding of the next level, where there's going to be a point of connection, which is why we say that the Kesser of the lower level is the Malchus of the higher level, because it's really only from the Malchus of the higher level that the lower level has any ability to grasp. That's going to be that point of relationality, that point of convergence, where the lowest point of the higher level can now have some sort of siach, some sort of communication with the highest point of the lower level. But above that, it's going to be considered as if it's Ein Sof. And therefore, we need all of these levels and gradations to ensure the connectivity between levels. V'hinei, Al Kain, and therefore we can now understand that even though we just said that it's really the Rishimu itself, the irreducible trace of divine light that remains even after the Tzimtzum, which is the revelation of the capacity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu to reveal himself by way of finitude as well, because the Rishimu is this paradox of a finite containment of infinite light, where the infinite light is not reduced, but nevertheless the finite containment can begin to take shape. This secret of the Nekudas HaRishimu, the paradox of all paradoxes. Yes, it's the beginning nature of the possibility of the Sitra Achra, but at that lofty level, there's no relationality between the lower levels that are going to emerge afterwards. There has to be an Olam Anikudim. There has to be a separate level in which there can be some element of relationality. The Rishimu is still fundamentally revealed to be part and parcel of the worlds of the infinite. So obviously, even though we see the emergent possibility of otherness emerging, nevertheless, we can't claim that emergence of otherness comes from the Rishimu itself. There has to be a gradational descent in which we can then say eventually, that then finally at the bottom of Kedusha, which is going to be the Malchus of Atzilus, this is fundamental, that in spite of the fact that the emergence of the possibility of the emergence of the possibility of the emergence of the Sitra Achra takes place at the loftiest levels of the Rishimu, it's only going to actually be considered as being the source of its unfolding when it descends down the number line. And therefore, that's why we're talking so much in the Olam HaNikudim. V'hinei kesheyatzu hakelim ha'elu shel HaNikudim, shehem misoid HaRishimu hazeh, Zak the Ramchal, that when these kelim emerged after the gar, which were able to stand and hold the light, and then the Zayin Tachtonim, the 7 lower spheros, came out in the kelim, which were emergent from the Rishimu, which is present within the Halal as a result of the Tzimtzum, Hine Sham Hayamitgale Zeh HaShoresh Shemimenu Teitze Achar Kach HaSitra Achra. It's specifically Shviras HaKelim, which is the congealment of the potencies of the Rishimu, which are now being revealed in a secondary descent, which is going to be the source from which the Sitra Achra can actually begin to emerge, which are the Zayin Malachim of Edom, which is the klipa v'chulei. Acha inyan hu. But we have to remember, ki be'emes ein hasitra achra yoitzees ella mehavav ktsavois levad, aval loy min hagar haklali. But like we said, in this world of Olam Hanikudim, it's only coming about from within the Vak, from within the Zayin Tachtonim, from within those lower seven elements of the Olam of Nikudim, but not from the Gar, which we said are rectified. Ulechein ad kan ba'olam hanikudim loy nikra shenetgal l'shayrosh hasitra achar lezaha inyan ki akol haya b'soid gar levad shehem yud kei habayim min hadvekos kanizka la'el v'loy min hakav. The reason Olam Hanikudim is the first place in which we begin to talk about the Sitra Achra emerging, even though the emergent principle began already by the world of the Rishimu, is because everything before the world of Nikudim, which is taking place within Adam Kadmon, which is considered the Vav Hey, because we said that Simsum and the Kav, the Halal and the Kav, are the Vav Hey. Anything above that is going to be considered a Yud Hey. And all of the worlds of the Rishimu, the worlds prior to the Shvira, are all considered to be part and parcel of the realm of unity, which are connected fundamentally, and they're not the light that is descending into orderly grasp of being. אבל הדברים האלו עומדים ברומו של עולם ואסור להרחיב בהם הדיבור, ואי אפשר לומר אלא ריש מילין והמשכיל יבן. What the Ramchal is hinting to us over here, where he says this matter stands at the apex of existence, and it's forbidden to spend too much time descending into these matters, and that all we can do is speak about them in headers, and that only one who has an understanding will come to understand, is the ascendant source of the Shvira. When we talk about the Shvira, and we talk about Klipa, and we talk about Sitra Achra and its point of emergence, we look back to the world of Nikudim, we look back to the world of Tohu, and Hamtakas Adinim B'Sharashim goes back up to that place, into the Iris of Tohu. But we also understand that the emergence of concealment, the emergence of constriction started way, 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 way up the number line, all the way back into the infinite realms of the Rishimu, because all of this has been the setup process. And the Arizal hints to this as well, that from the Shvira you could be Mevin Davar, Mevi Reishiso me'achriso, that if you spend time contemplating the Shvira down here, you could understand it in its ascendant roots. But nevertheless, we can't speak of the emergent principle of concealment until we come to the world of the Nikudim, because prior to that, even though, yes, there were gradations of concealment upon concealment in relationship to the infinite light, nevertheless, those relative stages of concealment and shvira and trauma were all contained within the infinite light itself, so to speak, and therefore we can't speak of the shvira there, because then we would run into the risk of, God forbid, coming to claim that there are levels in the infinite space, and we know that, God forbid, there are no levels in the infinite space, but nevertheless we can abstract the nature of the levels back up to that space, and we can understand them by way of pure abstraction, where we know that it's a mitzias she'enim a mitzias. These ideas that we're talking about don't exist in those upper levels, but the principal forms of them were taking place in accordance to their own existence on that level, which we can't speak of in any other way other than Reish Milin v'Hamaskil Yavin. Nimsa shebekelim ha'ela, but in these kelim of the Zayin Tachtonim of the Olam Hanikudim, Nimsa Shorish l'Sitra Achra Kanizkaleel. This is where we're going to begin to talk about the Shorish of the Sitra Achra, even though we know that which we can't say, which is it comes from the highest places imaginable, which is HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Ratzon and Elam. But we have to really go down and understand this process of the emergence of the Sitra Achar with the Sheva Malachim and the Kalim. We have to understand that, God forbid, we are not talking about the emergence of concealment at the place of the Rishimu. But nevertheless, we understand that the principal roots and the emergent quality of Kadosh Baruch Hu's concealment begin there. The Sitra Achra, which is the emergent congealment of difficulty and concealment, which HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted in the world, that takes shape in the Olam Hanikudim. We're not talking about the Shorashim of the Shvira. We're not talking about the Tzimtzum. We're not talking about the Rishimu. We're not talking about all that which takes place in the congealment and the concealment prior to the Olam Hanikudim, because that point where the Sitra Achra is going to emerge, so that it becomes something that is susceptible to human beings and our choices and our work, that's all we're talking about. And that's what the Olam HaNikudim represents. But we see already what the Ramchal has been doing for us. That yes, the shvira is going to give birth to all sorts of shverkeit. Yes, the shvira is going to give birth to all sorts of concealment. But nevertheless, we have to always hold on to the awareness that the shvira is just the continuity and the continuation of all of the stages of the unfolding that take place prior to the tzimtzum, through the tzimtzum, in the rishimu, and afterwards. It's just that we're not going to be talking about it that way because we want to use the shira sakelim as this kind of point of emergence of an existence that is operating in a state of chaos, wherein human volitionality is now going to become the most fundamental commodity. And that's why we identify the Olam HaNikudim as this point of emergence of the Sitra Achra and concealment. But don't think for a second that it takes shape somehow as a result of a mistake. It was all embedded within the entire unfolding of the Tzimtzum from before creation itself, within the Machshava Keduma, within the Tzimtzum itself, and within the Rishimu. We're just not talking about on that level. So anytime we encounter a symptom, we have to understand that in truth it's rooted in a place far higher than symptoms. And this is part of the process of Hamtakas Adin and Bisharasham. If we could understand the purpose of the Shvira and the unfolding of the Shvira, and at what stages the Shvira unfolds into new gradations of concealment, we can hold on to the singular thread through which HaKadosh Baruch Hu is revealing himself and understand how all of the degradations and all of the processes are ultimately one fell swoop of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's descent for the sake of a revelation and an ascendancy that's going to take place after creation that could not have taken shape without this descent itself, Be'ezras Hashem.